Welcome to Riverside Insights Gifted Coordinator Toolkit on Clustering and Flexible Grouping. I'm Monica Simons. You are here. Welcome to the video overview of this module. Let's start with the why. Why do we need to talk about clustering and flexible grouping? Remember, this is like your elevator speech. I want you to think for just a moment about how elementary students spend the majority of their time in heterogeneous classroom settings. Many times class rosters are set in a fashion that does not take into consideration the learning needs of all students. Many schedules are built around specials, such as art or music, or they are built around dyslexia services or speech therapy services. And while that is all wholly appropriate, ensuring that students are placed in a way so that teachers can maximize their planning and students can maximize their learning opportunities is important. And the implications are that teachers can more easily meet their students' needs, all of their students' needs. And gifted students receive differentiation on a regular basis. It's important to remember that all students are strategically placed for maximum growth opportunity. In other words, this is not a GT thing. It is a good teaching thing. So let's dive into the guiding questions. First of all, let's take a review of how we currently place our students in classes. In elementary schools, traditionally we have used systems that you may have heard called the blue and pink card system. In other words, girls got pink cards and boys got blue cards. Some information was written on them about some data perhaps, or services that they may need. Sometimes information such as who they should or should not be placed with is included. However, the systems are not necessarily created in a way that is statistically defensible. And so using an actual clustering model is really important. The second thing you need to think about is, does your state have requirements for grouping GT students? For example, Texas has very clear requirements required by the state for how GT students are clustered K through 12. And so finding a clustering model that provides an opportunity for these students to be placed in compliance with requirements, as well as ensuring that all students are placed according to their needs, can help benefit the teachers and the students. So let's talk about clustering. How would that impact your students? Would they more likely be placed in a situation where their learning includes opportunities to be grouped with other students who have similar abilities and interests? If you have a very small school with few sections, then what challenges might you see? When you have very few sections, there's not a lot of mobility space for the students to move between classes. Students end up being placed with the same students over and over. And sometimes, while that's a good thing, other times it can be a draining process for the students. Now, consider when you are placing students and you're doing it in a strategic fashion, you're using some sort of sorting system. The perceptions by the students and the parents could be that there's a good class and a bad class, or a high class and a low class. Having a plan for how you're going to communicate that is a misconception, that this is not tracking, will be crucial. And that's why it's really important you find a model that has been backed by research. And then, of course, what are your scheduling conflicts? Will you be able to have all students who receive pull out, whether it is for dyslexia services, speech services, special education services, ESL services, or advanced learning services? How will those occur? And what if a student receives more than one service? Think through what your timeline is going to be. How quickly are you going to be able to roll this out? And how will you scale it across the district? Sometimes this is an equity issue, whereas some campuses are more easily able to use this type of model for grouping their students and others not. And there can be perceptions that some schools are getting a different type of treatment. And then, as always, what are your success metrics? How will you know that the cluster grouping is working? And if there are areas that it is not successful, how do you determine if it is the model or if it is implementation of the model so that you can calibrate? Your 3 best practices. Use a cluster grouping model, such as the total school cluster grouping model, so that every single student is strategically placed and teachers can more easily differentiate. Build your master schedules in advance so that flexible grouping can occur. This flexible grouping could be cross-class, it could be cross-grade. Now, there are challenges involved with doing something like this. However, your more advanced learning students really do need this opportunity, especially if you are employing acceleration. And ensure that your teachers are receiving the training that they need, not just for how, but why this is so important. Dive into the research. I have put plus marks next to 2 in particular. The first one is the Total School Cluster Grouping and Differentiation Handbook. This is the 2nd edition. It is a guide for why and how. It talks about all the examples that you may run into, and so that you already have a plan for them. The second book actually takes you through some of the process that is mentioned in the other resource, but it also goes into some professional learning modules to support your rollout. We hope this Gifted Coordinator Toolkit on clustering and flexible grouping has been helpful. Let's continue the conversation and learn together.